you knew then what you know now, are there things that would have been pretty easy to have created in the architecture to?
If you hadn't said pretty easy
okay,
to do,
sorry.
I would have
Strike that.
Yeah. Well, no. So are there things I wish I could have done differently? Yes. The obvious one is, why didn't we pick 128 bits of address space in 1977 when we made the decision? I made the decision that the internet only needed 32 bits of address space. And many of you have already heard this story, but it's a very simple one. For a year, the engineers argued during 1976 about how big the address space should be. And nobody came to any conclusion. Some people wanted variable length addresses, but the programmers hated that because that meant you had to spend cycles finding the fields in the packet, and they didn't want to waste any cycles. So that went out the door. And then the other guy said, well, how about 128 bits of address space? And I remember thinking, that's 3.4 times 10 to the 38th addresses. This is an experiment. We don't even know if it's going to work. How on earth could we possibly argue that we need 3.4 times 10? It's like 1.2 gigawatts. You remember the, great Scott. So in the end, I said, look, 32 bits gives us 4.3 billion unique terminations. That's got to be enough for an experiment. And if it works, look, this is 1976, 77. If it works, then we should do a production version. Well, the problem is we didn't ever end the experiment. So you're still part of it. It's 2010. We're going to run out. So if I could have done that differently, I would have. But I couldn't have passed the red face test trying to explain to anybody why I needed 128 bits of address space. The same is true for authentication. Public key cryptography was publicly invented. It was invented before this, but it was publicly invented in 1977 by Whit Diffie and Marty Hellman at Stanford. They published their paper. The paper had the concepts in it, but no working algorithms. Okay, now I knew these guys. I'd been on the Stanford campus. They'd just come to the Defense Department in late 1976, so I knew what Whit and Marty were doing. And looking back on it, if I only had known that there were algorithms coming that could be applied to this public key crypto trick, I would have wanted to put that into the system as early as possible in order to have very strong authentication mechanisms at several layers in the architecture. But as it happens, there wasn't anything to implement until 78, 79, and by that time we'd already frozen the design. And we were well on our way to getting implementations done and couldn't retrofit that very effectively. So yeah, I wish that we could have done some of these things differently, but I'm not even sure we could have persuaded anybody that we should do those, just given the timing.